thank you for tuning in. So, you are listening to a community agriculture project production. My name is Emily, and the community agriculture project is all about trying to connect people with their local agriculture resources and also just enabling people to embrace their own food sovereignty through getting a closer connection with their food. Today we are talking to my friend Jusleen about an article that she wrote that was published this year. Congratulations, Jusleen. It is called The Impact of Food, Distributing Resilience Through Language and Practice. So Jusleen and I know each other from our undergraduate education at Rutgers University. We spent some time together in similar circles, and I really wanted to talk to Jusleen about her article because it really reminded me of the writing that I did while developing the community agriculture project that involved me doing some independent research and interviewing different farms around the country. So that's kind of what inspired that project. So in her article, The Impact of Food, Jusleen has a similar approach, working with and interviewing a couple different farms, which she'll talk about a little bit later. But her and I are really able to relate over our similar experiences, just being at the farms, talking to the people there, and the people that are within a farm's network. We're able to relate over that and just the process of writing and everything that we learn in those environments. So, yeah, in our chat, Jusleen and I will talk about everything from language to experiential learning to distributed resilience, which is an idea in her article, as well as anthropology in the food and ag space, food interactivism, and food sovereignty and security. So that's just a little idea of what we're going to cover, and I hope you enjoy. Let's get to it.
So, hey, I'm Jusleen. I just graduated from Rutgers with a degree in anthropology in May. I'm currently working for the New Jersey Department of Agriculture for a nutrition program, and it's been an interesting experience. Definitely a little challenging, but I'm happy that, I found something that I'm passionate about, that I could extend my passion for food and agriculture into my career in that way. I think it's like a real privilege to be able to do that. But yeah, in terms of like where I am at life and how it connects to this project, I'm also kind of a background story person, so I guess I'll start like a while ago. So my sophomore year of undergrad, I took this class called Botanic Sociality, and it was an anthropology class, and basically we were reading about indigenous plant knowledge and different ways that people around the world like connect on a spiritual level, on a cultural level, and also like a very material level to nature and plants specifically. And I had just never really thought about the environment in that kind of way before. Like the year before, I participated in this big charity project where I biked from New Jersey to Portland, Oregon, and I stayed at a bunch of different farms, so I had kind of like had that kind of exposure to food and agriculture there, but learning about the connection between nature in that space and people and their lives and community didn't really come until I like took this class. And then senior year came around, and I knew that I wanted to do my thesis on something related to this topic, so I had started volunteering at a student-run farm at the school.
And was that like So the only farm that I worked on in undergrad was Elijah's Promise. Is it Elijah's Promise or something different?
Elijah's Promise was the organization that we fundraised for the bike trip.
Right.
The farm that I worked at was the student farm at Rutgers Gardens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a cool experience, and I wanted like my project to ultimately like surround that experience. And then I kind of just like, I started talking to a bunch of people and professors and, you know, other students and people in the community, and it kind of just like went haywire after that. Like I had so many different ideas and like different connections that I was making to my experience at the farm, and I ended up going to Vermont and working with a nonprofit over there. So yeah, I'm getting kind of lost in what I'm...
No, I think it's great. Like, so, yeah, because it's kind of interesting just the way that, like, I feel like it's kind of similar to what I was talking about. Like, once that kind of, like, inspiration strikes and you, like, start seeing all this stuff around you, like, it all starts coming into your awareness of, like, what's going on in the agriculture space. You start to feel like, okay, how am I going to move forward, and what story am I going to tell, you know? So how did you form that story for yourself?
Yeah, so it was definitely a lot of workshopping. I think it just boiled down to like what was the most interesting and important for me to look deeper into, and like one of my favorite parts about working at the farm was like the connections that I was making with people, and like people that I was working with, other students, but then also like members of the CSA that came and like the consumers of the produce that we were growing. And so I became interested in people, and like, you know, I was studying anthropology, and like that's what anthropology is all about.
Right.
So I was like, this makes sense, like let me focus on community, and then from there I decided to focus on language, because of something that like my professor said that like really inspired me. But anyway, yeah, so I decided to kind of like zone in on the community aspect.
And so, could you just say what is the title of the piece that you wrote?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The impact of food, and how it contributes to distributed resilience and community. Something along those lines. I'm sorry, this was like months ago that I like wrote it and like did the whole process with it, but
I've totally been there. I
so
feel you.
the idea is basically like, how does language help create resilience in like a food-centered space?
Right.
And like one of the things that I talk about in the paper is that language surrounding local agriculture sometimes like drops a lot of these big gaps in just like it kind of avoids some of the downsides to local agriculture. That's like a really important thing to talk about. But yeah, so I wanted to really focus on like the nuances in terms of like how people were talking to each other, how people were talking to me as like a newcomer on the farm. So kind of like what you were saying, like how language can and should be inclusive, and like how that was being used to like sort of I don't want to say like indoctrinate, like to like welcome me into their community.
Yeah.
That's a good word for it.
Right.
So like last night I didn't want to like come in today and like not remember anything about my paper, so I was like reading through it last night, trying to like refresh my memory, and first of all I noticed that my writing changed a lot from what it originally was to like the published version, and like that's kind of obvious because you go through the editing process like so many times. You have like so many people reading your paper, and like it just gets like it changes. But like low-key, I kind of wish that I had almost like waited a couple months upon finishing my project to like go back and submit it for publishing, because now when I look back on it, there's like so many things I'm picking up on that like I would have wanted to explore more, or like kind of I would read a sentence and be like, oh well, I wish I explained that a different way, or like I don't know. So it kind of just goes to show that like this really is, like you were saying earlier, just like a constantly evolving thing. But Anyway, going back
I've
to
totally been there with my own writing.
I could keep going on that, but yeah. Also, like, you change so much as a person over time that it's like,
and I feel like
cringe a little when you read your own writing.
Like cringing, but also it's like I feel like this force that pushes us to like continue producing and creating. Honestly, like that room for improvement, which is like, it just is a learning process.
Yeah.
Like actually, when I was doing my independent research on like sustainability and agriculture and everything, they were really forcing this connection on like learning and like what does it really mean to learn.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been through so many like thought spirals on that topic of like ever since I started on that project that I like never published. I'm like, okay, what does it actually mean to learn? Like, how do people learn? Because like I was under this whole impression of like, people go and have this hands-on experience and they learn something. And like, maybe that's definitely part of it, but something a lot more potent. And like, I still really stand by the fact that experience teaches us something, because it's like, you had this publication experience and like, you learned what you would do differently and how you would go about it differently. And that's also how I felt about like people coming or going to farms and having an experience of like, doing like a canning workshop or like whatever they're gonna go do at a farm. Like having that experience that like leads you down this like reflection later. Like you put your energy towards something, you did something, and like, and now what? How do you move forward in a new way after that?
Right. Yeah.
And that I was like so hooked on like experiential learning and still kind of am for a really long time, because I'm like that it's just people need to have that new experience to be able to go somewhere new.
I think the cool thing about experiential learning is that you like really take it with you. With experiential learning, it's not just you like entering a space and like, consuming knowledge. Like you're not just taking things in, you're also like processing it and then bringing it to other parts of your life. So like even if, for example, like the students that I work with on the farm, they were only there for that summer. Like that was an internship that they were doing, but those students are going to take what they learned on the farm and bring it wherever the heck else they decide to take it, even if it's not another farm. You know what I'm saying? Like even if they decide not to be full-time farmers in the future, like this experience of being around food and this conversation about agriculture is going to stay with them for the rest of their lives. And like it did for me too. I mean, obviously we're out here still talking about the experience, and it's been like over a year since I actually worked there. And honestly, like, just to like be perfectly candid, I also am still like figuring out a lot of where I want this project to take me in the future. Like after finishing it, I was kind of more, to be real, I was concerned about just getting a job and like, like leaving college and like getting settled in my life. And I knew that this was a good grounding space for me, because like I want to remain in this food and agriculture sphere for as long as I can. But I didn't necessarily know exactly where. And working for the state government for a nutrition program is pretty different from like working on a small farm. But I still do carry those values with me, and like that just shows how powerful that experience was. I still use a lot of that language too. Sometimes the language changes when I'm bringing it up in like a professional space that's different from, what it was like when I was out digging through dirt. But like the ideas are still there, and like the intention is still there.
Right. Yeah. I love that. I feel like this even goes back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier. There's something about like a low stakes environment, and this is not something to say like, oh, agricultural settings and farms and stuff are low stakes settings. Like I think that like food is vital, and I take it super seriously, and so like farms a lot of the times, like, in the field, like, are very much not low-stakes settings, because it's, like, there's a lot of things on the line. Like, there's, like, the livelihood of the farmer a lot of the times. There's, like, the livelihood of the people that are going to get this food. There's, like, food and land sovereignty. There's, like, a lot of things that actually are at stake that are very serious. But, like, at the same time, there's kind of this environment that can be created that, like, is a low-stakes learning environment for somebody else coming in, you know, like, somebody else coming into the environment and being exposed to this whole thing. And, like, I guess with that being said, like, really anything can be an experiential learning environment if it's about the mindset. But, like, I always saw farms as this just, like, really amazing dynamic environment to, like, pull in all those factors of, like, that experience of, like, learning and changing your framework a little bit, like, just especially because it's related to food, which is, like, that bottom line that we all share at the end of the day. Like, we all gotta eat, you know?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like, the farms always felt like a low-stakes environment for me to, like, go and, like, maybe mess up or just, like, form new thought ways to take with me to other places.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like it's really important for us to, like, have those spaces to get our hands dirty as we move forward and, like, find what's important to us, you know?
Yeah, definitely. And that also has a lot to do with, like, so in my paper I talk about distributed resilience. Really what I mean by that is, like, the concept of resilience isn't just, like, a one-way street. Like, there's no one idea, there's no one method of approaching it. It is really dynamic, and, like, it comes about when you have new people entering new spaces and carrying ideas with them. And it's, like, kind of intangible. Like, yeah, I'm, like, being super abstract right now, but, like, that's where the distributed part comes, right? Like, you go on the farm, you get dirty, you change you said thought ways. I feel like that's a great way to describe it. You change your thought ways, and, like, you go out and then spread those thought ways into the world, and it gets distributed.
Right.
So, like, that's how you send this idea of resilience, like, out into the world, and that's how you start, you know, planting the seeds.
Right. It's like
seeds of resilience.
Like, if there's one thing about me, it's like I'm totally gonna be esoteric, and I'm totally gonna be, like, using these metaphors that seem super cheesy related to, like, farming and agriculture.
Like, I just can't get them out of my head anymore. Like, I'm just always gonna be making corny plant jokes for the rest
There's
of my life.
There's another one. Corny plant jokes.
There you go.
Yeah. It's a thing. But yeah, it's really hard for it to not get a little bit, like, esoteric or abstract when you're describing resilience, because it's like, especially considering the unique experience of just, like, every single person and community out there, it's like resilience building deserves to be looked at through a spectrum of, like, macro and micro experience.
Yeah, and that, I also feel like anthropology is, like, really key to understanding that. So, like, every time somebody asks me to, like, define what anthropology is, I always get so stuck. Like, you know, not me, like, studying this for 4 years and still not having a clue. Like, so like, the thing that I like about anthropology, especially in, like, this food and ag space, is the fact that you get to see the perspective of the individual as it relates to the community, and then also, like, lived experience. Like, what does it actually be like? What is it actually like to be a human in whatever setting, environment, space that you're in? Because we all, like, are walking on this earth doing our own thing. We all have, like, our own experience, and anthropology lets you, like, sit with other people on a deeper level than I think any other science or social science. And yeah, it lets you kind of put yourself in other people's shoes. And yeah, I feel like that was really key to this whole project, because, like, I really wanted to illuminate the experiences of the people working in the organizations that I studied, the people being impacted. And that's one of the things, actually, like, side note, that I would want to go deeper into in the future, like if I were to pursue this again. Because I didn't get to with this. You can only do so much in a year, but...
Right. That's very true.
But yeah.
It's interesting because you said, like, anthropology, it helps you look at everyone's experience and like, we're all just like people doing our own things walking on this earth, but it's like, then on the other side of that, like, we're all so connected, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really cool to be able to see both and to be able to understand food from, like, both of those perspectives. Because when you try to approach, like, food sovereignty, I think that that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started with food sovereignty. That's like a whole other...
Yeah, it's like... Yeah. If you want to talk about it, I'm here for it.
Sure, yeah. I mean... Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say about, like, anthropology, though, before we get into food sovereignty. Right now with anthropology, people are really into the idea of, like, applied anthropology, which is basically, like, you go out into the world and you, like, do your research, usually through participant observation. So essentially what that is it's like you going out and experiencing the same things that the people that you're studying are experiencing, and you are interacting with them, you are engaging the same activities, and you sort of, like, become part of their, you become part of their life.
Right. Interesting, because, like, scientifically, I wonder how much their presence affects the study at hand.
Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot. It's called observer's paradox, actually. Basically, the consensus is that, like, you can't avoid it, but you just kind of, like, think about it and factor that into your research. Like, anthropology is so, like, arbitrary, you know? It's also, like, very narrative, and you can kind of be creative with it in that way. So it's like taking your experience and then using that for change, which is, like, I was, like, kind of confusing myself a little bit when I was doing the actual participant observation, because I'm like, wait a second, so I'm out here, like, experiencing, okay, I'm out here, like, doing this research. I'm doing the same work as these other people. Like, they're also learning these new things, and, like, they're gonna take it with them, and, like, I'm going to as well. And so, like, that's where the idea of, like, food interactivism came about.
So just a quick note here about the term food interactivism. This term is accredited by Jusleen to Dr. Kathleen Riley and Amy L. Paugh, and you can see their piece linked in the description notes.
I talk about that in the paper, like, a little bit, but it's basically, like, you're basically, like, doing research with people that are also interested in learning, right? Like, all these students are also interested in,
and that is, like, so true. Okay, that's, like, school. A lot of the times, like, school, hopefully you're in a space where, like, everyone else is also valuing learning, you know, in the same way. That's also, like, how sometimes academic environments can be compromised if, like, a bunch of people in that environment really are not valuing learning in the same way. But so that can happen. But I definitely feel like, if you, like, attend, or if you're, like, in a certain environment where, like, everyone is sharing that value of, like, I am here to learn something, like, no matter what, that's really powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And then I got to kind of, like, poke at some of the things that they were talking about too, and be like, hey, well, have you thought about this? And, like, they would do the same thing, and it was kind of like we were all actively participating in the research together, if that makes sense.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I like that perspective a lot. Of just, like, yeah, it's like, it's active, it's consensual.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes what's a little bit dangerous about anthropology is just like the non-consensual aspects
Right.
that could be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was going through the IRB, the whole IRB process, like getting approval to do this,
Wait, what is that, IRB?
it's the Institutional Research Board. So like for, I'm pretty sure you're required to do it for like certain sciences too, but I know that for social sciences you have to like, first of all, you have to do a training on like how to work with human subjects,
Right.
and then you're required to like, I think you have to like come up with a way of consensually working with them. Like I really wanted to go deep into language, so I knew that I wanted to like record some of the conversations that I had with people. So I just like took the safe route, and I was like, I'm gonna print out like a consent form and do it. Like I'm gonna have everybody sign this.
Yes.
They need to know exactly what they're getting into and like how I'm gonna use their words and experiences.
Their data, like, yeah.
Yeah. And
How am I going to use you as data?
yeah, and like obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but I kept everybody anonymous because, you know, I didn't know how many people would be interested in like reading the paper before it got published eventually. And it's kind of difficult, like as a researcher, to go out and like, you know, you can't like send your paper to everybody and be like, is this okay?
Right.
So I was just like, let me just
Yeah.
make it all anonymous.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way that I approached it. But yeah, so I had like both formal and informal interviews with people, but I just like had everybody sign the paper.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so important. And I had no idea about like that IRB. That's never like been in my sphere ever.
Well, it's probably a different process for like your discipline.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think just because of my the background that I come from, it's never really discussed like that because I've never really like been trained on how to work with human subjects. I kind of just like talk to people and then I'm like, and like make sure that I check in and be like, okay, these are my intentions, you know, but
Yeah.
it's interesting.
Yeah. And I know like anthropology we have a complicated history. Like this field is obviously really like, it's gone through its phases, and I think for the most part it has changed for the better in recent years. I think there's a lot of people who are definitely more aware of like how they're perceived by the groups that they're so-called studying, and like they're really sensitive to those things, which is awesome. But yeah, you kind of have to be like very hyper aware of that and just like make sure that the people you're working with like fully understand what your intentions are. Yeah.
100%. Yeah, that's a super important just for like humans in general, like human communication in general.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good that it's reiterated, I guess, in that way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So the food sovereignty topic, I don't even know.
Right. What was your experience with food sovereignty?
Well, right. So I just want to go back and say that like it's really cool that you were inspired at first by that class in botanic sociology. Yeah. I'm just like always continually inspired by the way that people relate to plants.
Yeah.
So that's like always a source of inspiration for me. But food sovereignty, I mean, it's like such a huge topic.
Big buzzword.
It's such a buzzword. Like I was saying before, really the root of it is like we all have a relationship with food, and I think that anything, even sometimes in people's experiences, like there's a lot of like unknown or unseen forces that drive up barriers between them and their food, of like food apartheid and like food deserts. There can be so much between somebody and their food, and when food is like such a personal, cultural, like, insert 100 other descriptive words here, like when it is that type of experience, like it just means a lot. So
yeah,
I don't know if that sounds super cryptic, but
no,
yeah,
I mean, like, I'm coming from it from a perspective of like I still have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
The first time that I was exposed to the idea of food sovereignty was at that internship that I was telling you about earlier. So like, there are a lot of cool like grassroots movements, even just in the US, that are all about food sovereignty for their individual communities. And like, the part that I really like about it is the idea that food connects you to like so many other aspects of life, and it's basically like, it's like the source of,
it's like this energetic like source.
yeah,
It is not the energetic source, but like a very, very prominent energetic source
yeah,
for humans and living things.
yeah. And like, when you think about it in the context of food security, like, you can't have food security if you're not economically secure, if
Right.
you're not like, you know, if you don't have access to
And
healthcare.
why? And but that part, like, why can't you have food security if you're not economically secure? Like,
Yeah.
that is food sovereignty.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the economic security should not obstruct your food security. Like, and so, yeah, that's just one part of it.
right. It's very, very interconnected. But basically, like, you can't fix the food issues unless you get at all these other issues.
Yeah,
Like,
It's
they
like-
all, yeah,
it's all related.
yeah.
It's a web, for sure. And sometimes it's Jenga.
That's a good metaphor.
Yeah. But,
Don't take out the wrong block.
right. And, yeah. Food sovereignty, it makes me think of, like I said before, like, also just like land sovereignty. And food sovereignty to me is like, is not compromising our ability to be able to grow clean and healthy food. And by clean and healthy food, I mean like food that isn't containing like a lot of toxins and just
Yeah.
like things that could like hurt us if eaten in a certain amount, you know. And just like food that's made from healthy soil and clean water, you know. And yeah, I think we have, like, humans, especially colonizers, have definitely compromised the ability for land to be able to produce like what we need in terms of healthy and culturally appropriate food.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's definitely a long, deep history there, which I feel like is a lot. It's just a lot.
It's just a lot.
It's-
It is like so much.
Yeah. So over the summer, like when I first started working for the state government, I was basically like going out into the community, well, not the communities if it's like one. I was going out into like various parts of New Jersey, and
I say that all the time, by the way, so that's like so funny that you're like, it's not just one, it's nuanced.
Yeah. Part of my job was to like go out and work with people running like community centers, school, summer programs for kids, and like people that are participating in this nutrition program. Basically, it's a program that feeds low-income children, like eligible children, over the summer. So they become eligible for free and reduced price meals that are like reimbursable from the government. And so my job was to like go out and help them kind of establish their programs and like get them all set up for the summer and it was like it was an eye-opening experience. Like, it's one thing to like be a person that, you know, studies food insecurity at like an academic level, and then another to like really go out and like be there and see what it's actually like to, and I don't want to claim to know what it's like to be food insecure even after having had that experience, because I truly don't. And I'm lucky that I don't. But, and I think it's important also, this is where I was going, to like allow those people to speak on it, and to like define their own pathways however they see fit.
And that is food sovereignty.
Yeah.
And that. It's that's so true. Especially coming from academia, like a core issue with academia is like claiming to know that which is not your experience. And
I don't think that that's what academia should be. Like, it should be used to illuminate those experiences. If anything. But so I have a question for you. Earlier you were saying, like, when we were talking about food insecurity and economic insecurity, like, intersecting, can you, like, explain that a little bit more? And how they shouldn't be connected is basically what you said. Like, why can you not have food security if you don't have economic security?
I feel like, this is a whole new can of beans, but but like everything is. So there's a few things that come to my mind just in the relation of like economic security and food security. Like, first of all, the thing that I think about is like hunter-gatherers. Like, if we go back a really long time and think about like what was it like to survive on this planet and like our ancestors' survival, like it was accomplished far before like ideas of like economy and like I guess the idea of economy like still existed in our ancestors' livelihoods, but like there, if you think about it in its most bare sense, it's like it's like us and the earth, you know, and living things on earth and resources that support systems to exist. And so there was a time where we could collect resources to support our livelihood without having to worry about being able to pay for them. You know, and of course, like, when we think about pay, like, now we think about it in terms of money, but like at the end of the day, like, everything is an energetic exchange. And like so I don't know if hunter-gatherers or like, I know like current day like foragers, for example, a lot of foragers that I know like will be very considerate about the energetic exchange of like the food that they're finding in the forest, you know, and like there's certain like respectful rules just to make sure that like everybody can continue to have access to this resource, and that you're taking an amount that's respectful and you're not overtaking. So there's of course that like energetic exchange system, but there was a time when people could like freely exchange with the earth, and when we get to the place where it becomes like extractive, and like where greed starts playing into it, where it's like, all right, you're taking more than you need, and there's like you're hoarding, you know, and you're not necessarily like letting that be of equal exchange with other like beings around you, whether that be human beings or like or you know, other animals and other insects and just like all the other like souls and lives that we share this earth with, then it gets to be a little bit crazy. So like that's just like background, but in terms of like economic security, now if you are in the present day, it's like a lot of the times you'll go to the grocery store and you'll be like, yeah, we accept SNAP here, and like we accept EBT, and it's like there's all these like government programs to make sure that like you can still eat, even if you don't have economic financial security. But at the same time, that is so conditional. Like what you even have access to is conditioned by the government, and you might not be having access to foods that are appropriate to sustain your livelihood and your physical and emotional health, you know, because like food is also emotional. So like at the end of the day, like why I'm super, super passionate about empowering people to have the knowledge to grow their own food and connect resources from many places to allow people to grow their own food is that like in the most ideal world, like people have access to these things that they need without barriers and boundaries and conditions from another force or human, you know?
Right.
So
like why is there access to food being defined by anyone but themselves?
But yourselves, and that's like very, very descriptive of I think the experience of based on the stories that I've heard from Indigenous Americans, it's like when people came in and pushed people onto reservations, it's like you are removing an access for people that have had an ancestral connection with this specific area of land for a really long time, you know, and like and you're changing that for somebody, and for what? Like for your own like greed and selfishness and desire for power. And like why that our food is like conditioned by all that. And so food sovereignty is just about like allowing each individual to have that connection with their food, and then like understanding what it takes to empower that, because it's going to be different for everyone.
I like that. Well said.
Thank you. I love this conversation. Thank you. I just want to say thank you for your time and your energy and for your writing, and it was really great to talk to you today.
Thank you too for your time, and I always enjoy meeting other people that are kind of interested in food and agriculture, and seeing where they're coming from, where they're going with it. And I think it's also cool that you're coming from a science background, and my background is totally different, but we're out here having these conversations, and
and we'll see where it takes us, I guess. Hopefully it's somewhere good.
So I hope you enjoyed listening to Jusleen and I's conversation. Thank you for listening to a community agriculture project production, and please check out our website communityagproject.com and our Instagram at communityagproject, where you can follow this journey of finding and forming community within agriculture networks. Until next time.